No? Oh. How very sensible of you.
At last, he seems to be applying Phil's advice to debate, not lecture.
You want to say something? Yeah, do, please, do.
I don't think I would really make it because of
You don't
my
think you'll make
dialect
it?
or something.
Because of what?
They tend to consider people's dialects and backgrounds, and I think that would be in the way for me to make it.
I don't think that's right. I think you'd have been right if...
Well, now there's a dialogue going on.
And the fact that you
Suddenly it's slightly enlivened.
I mean, in the old days, I'm going back quite a long time, but the fact that you're a woman would have counted against you. The fact that you were black would have counted against you. None of that applies now. I mean, if you want to do it, of course you can.
But we still don't get to see a lot of people like me on TV.
No, you don't yet. But look, that's because not enough people like you have tried. But give it a go.
Now it sounds like there's a day programme and it's more animated, much more like it.
That you feel that...
Hang on a second, let's just talk...
Could I ask why you feel the way that you don't think that we could make it because the dialect doesn't get in the way, our dialect form? Why?
Because it's changed. It's changed enormously. Let me just tell you a little very quick story. I used to be a television newsreader. I read the 9 o'clock news as it was on BBC One for 6 years.
But then, just 10 minutes into the lesson, he's back to telling BBC anecdotes.
Boring job. It just happens to pay a lot of money and you get to be famous.
It's a bad move. He's lost the attention of the class
When I
again.
was there, they asked me if I'd see a bloke who wanted to be our political editor. Terrific.
Stories themselves are fascinating stories. It's just there isn't enough room in this classroom for the children.
Give him a bit of, assess him to see whether he was good enough to broadcast.
Needs more of the students for it to become a proper dialogue. It's got to be a two-way thing. He gets 5 minutes to talk, they only get one question.
No chance. Nobody will be able to understand a word he says. And I couldn't have been more wrong. We gave him the job. His name was John Cole. It's changing. Believe me, it's changing. But look, some of you will know, you see that ghastly picture up on the wall that I've written this book.
Struggling to keep their interest, John decides to employ a visual aid and a familiar text.
And I'll read you a little bit from the book, if you'll let me. What makes good English? Because that's what we're concerned about, I think.
Now, they have read this, so it'd be intriguing to see what their responses are.
Want to answer. What you say is what you mean. Let me give you a couple of examples of ambiguous writing, ambiguous English that you may agree with me makes nonsense when you actually hear it. A suicide bomber, very topical this, a suicide bomber has struck again in Jerusalem. What? Exactly. He died the first time. Anyway, you know the point I'm making.
If he goes into the extended metaphor about the butterfly, then he's going to be in trouble.
Can't judge language in the same way that you test a car when its MOT has expired. It is possible to catch a butterfly, to pin it onto a board, and to study its anatomy. But the essence of the butterfly has vanished.
Abby's had a hand up now for a very long time.
It cannot be examined and analysed to see whether it works any more than you can study a pinned butterfly.
It takes a full 5 minutes for John to notice Abby and allow her to speak.
Yeah, sorry.
But don't you think you're sort of being ironic when you use the butterfly metaphor?
Well, it's a good point. It was slightly flowery language, I grant you, but I was trying to express an idea. Let me ask you a question. Did you understand the point? And this is not patronising, this is a serious question. Did you understand the butterfly metaphor when I made that point?
I understand what you were trying to say.
Then I rest my case. That's all I wanted to do.
However, you did say that language should not be ambiguous, and with the butterfly metaphor, there is a sense of ambiguity with
I
it.
don't agree with you. Why? Why was that an ambiguous metaphor?
Why do you not agree with me?
Well, because I think...
Well, they're in standoff, and he's doing well, actually, but what he has is he has a very aggressive pupil there who's portraying aggressive body language, who is also highly intelligent, which is an awful situation for any teacher to be in.
I hope that I'm communicating my thoughts to you. And in return, you've just done that to me. You've told me you thought my butterfly metaphor was crap. Well, fine. I mean, you're absolutely entitled to that.
When humour comes in, the mood lightens.
I probably will. I'll have another look at that, because you may be right.
John may have won over one pupil, but he's still not engaging with the majority of his class.
The teacher should apologise. Imagine that tiny, frail little insect flying thousands of miles. Come to you in a second. Language is
A real
always
teacher
on
would
the
allow
move.
the student to
It cannot be
speak there.
examined to see whether it works any more than you can study a pinned butterfly. And
There are a
understand
lot of
how
people
it
disenfranchised by the lesson. There's a lot of people just not connecting with it.
Sure, here in school, obviously. But you can understand. I saw in the newspaper the other day a diaper instead of a nappy. We're starting.
It needs to take more opinions, thereby keep it much, much shorter.
And it's being changed all the time. Now those are manifestations of a different culture from the American culture. The language is English. It's a different kind of English. They use words that we don't use. I mean, they talk, don't they, about, you know, a tap isn't a tap, it's a fork.
I remember being at school myself, just thinking, please shut up.
Then, with just 15 minutes of the lesson remaining, John raises a subject matter that gets everyone's attention.
Give me a couple of the sorts of words that you would use as a 15 and 16-year-olds that you wouldn't expect me to use.
A merkage, how about that one?
A merkage?
Yeah. You know,
What the hell's that?
you do it all the time in your interviews. You know when you're talking to an MP
Yeah.
and they're lying through their teeth, and you say to
You
them
mean when they are expressing themselves? Yes, all right.
in an
okay, lying
incorrect
through their
way,
teeth.
and you're
Right.
saying, that's not what I asked,
Yeah,
that's you murking them. Making them
Well-
feel...
fantastic. Right. See, I've never heard that before. We had a thing, it was ridiculous.
It has taken almost 3/4 of this lesson for John to allow his class equal time in the discussion.
It might have changed a little bit, I'm not sure.
Wow. We used to take the beginning of the word and add it on to the end of the word, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, well, look at that. It's come back again. I proved my point. Well, there you go. If we insist
He's now even looking more like a teacher.
that people will be excluded.
That's it, move forward.
Will be excluded.
Connect.
Is that part of your concern?
Well
Is that
done.
What you're saying?
That's not my... Yeah, it is my concern, kind of, but I just feel that everyone's being excluded at the end of the day because there's... I'm going to put it down into different classes. There's the middle class that might not be able to understand the working class and vice versa, and it works like that.
Right. And the way to get out of that...
And with the students on side, it seems he'll be forgiven almost anything.
I mean, if you came... Let's assume you were a first-generation immigrant. I mean, I'm reading a marvellous... what? Now, hang on, what's wrong with that? Have I said
There's
something?
nothing wrong with it. No.
OK, all right. Well, let's assume you were, right? And you came here, or your parents were, and they were unable to speak adequately to speak English. They would be held back, obviously. You wouldn't argue with that. They'd find life more difficult. Yeah,
Okay.
obviously they would, wouldn't they? Yeah. Sorry, you wanted to say something there.
With just a few minutes left, John takes a back seat and allows his pupils to dominate the discussion. This gives even the more introverted the confidence to challenge him.
Stupid rule.
Yeah, but you write a book about English language rules and then go and break them. Aren't you a hypocrite?
They're giving
Yeah, accept
of
that.
themselves very well.
If you read the book...
I'm a
I
proud
meant
little
that.
teacher.
Two more quick points. I'm running out of time. I should have looked at my watch earlier. Oh, God.
Phil even seems won over by John's performance.
Yeah, technically, it's
How to use them, how to apply
it's
them.
all over the
And if
shop,
I say to you,
but
if I
the
become
passion has come across.
I'm not a professor of English or something. I haven't studied English for 40 years and come up with the most profound findings. This is my view. Wow.
Amazing.
I can't believe that we've run out of time.
How do you feel?
Well, I feel as if I've not said anything. I feel as if I've been put through the ringer. Yeah.
Well, great. Could I ask for two things? What Mr. Humphreys did there was enormously emotionally taxing, and he got through it. I'd like you to give him a round of applause first.
I should applaud you, actually, because...
The polite thanks out of the way, Topset Year 11 give their verdict on John's teaching skills.
Do not interrupt us, no offence, Mr. Humphreys, when we are in the middle of our question.
But I thought I interrupted you helpfully, no?
No, you distracted me when I was trying to get to the point of my question.
Oh, well...
Anybody else?
not
want
very-
to salute
not
and
very good
execute? Tita.
I just think you need to be a bit more open-minded and realise that we're not taught the same as you were.
Absolutely accept that.
I think you kind of was a bit deceptive in your language that you used.
Meaning?
Meaning that a lot of the things you said, once you'd said it, it was masked by some jargon.
Such as?
If you ask me a question, I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
Someone asked me a question.
Do you feel that today's society ignores received accent?
I do feel that, but at the same time, I think moving on to the BBC, they are...
Class over, it's time for John's mentor to review his performance.
Right. Debrief. Yeah, well, come on. How did I do? Be honest, they were, for God's sake.
This is how I normally start when observing lessons. How do you feel it went?
How do I feel? And disastrously, utterly disastrously. I went in there with your list of your suggestions, and there were messages I intended to impart and simply didn't, because I made the mistake, I think, of getting caught up in the debate, caught up in their debate on their terms, made for good fun, made for a good stimulating exchange, and I think if I were you as a professional teacher from the outside watching it, I would think, actually, that's quite useful, a useful exercise, but it wasn't teaching.
What you did was kind of a fairly archetypal beginner teacher's lesson.
Oh, really?
In that you stood up in front of them, and it only really got going when they became involved. But after the first 2.5 minutes, people were going...
Were they? Were they?
Until you threw it open to the floor, and then suddenly they were involved in the lesson. You, I think, were maybe a little overconfident in a way, despite the emotional issues that you have, that one can...
You told me to be passionate, you see.
That worked. Like, the moment that you started reading from a text, suddenly the incredible newsreader skills you've got came, and everybody was slightly more enlivened. It really is a case of, as a teacher, getting in there, facilitating the learning, pointing them in the direction and then letting them discover it themselves. There was a bit too much John Humphrys and not enough Year 11.
I wanted to argue with them.
Great.
Yeah, but I wanted to win.
Well, you kind of have to give that up, really. You let them win sometimes.
We weren't, I thought, connecting intellectually at many points. When we did, and it happened sometimes, that was terrific.
Yes.
And you could see the youngster kind of going, yeah, wonderful feeling that, because you actually feel that there is a meeting of minds.
But what you experienced there was probably exactly the same as any supply teacher in the country would experience. The emotional aspect of it is really quite tough.
Boy, they earn their money.
Yeah.
No argument about that. Thanks, Philip.
Cheers, John.
Finally, are we likely to see our broadcasting legend back in the classroom?
Absolutely no. Not without maybe 5 years of intensive training and a huge amount of experience. I didn't do it very well, and I know I didn't do it very well. I learned quite a lot from them. I suspect they learned very little, if anything, from me. I think maybe some of them enjoyed it a bit, towards the end anyway. But I am not going to give up the day job. Thank you, Paul.